tonight's training is called automatic nutrition. I think this one is probably one of the most important times of the year, or this is probably one of the most important times of the year to cover it because we're at the end of May now, basically. Summer has arrived, and this is usually where life starts to get a bit more chaotic for people. You know, you've got the barbecues, the weddings, the holidays, the weekends away, meals out, family events, drinks randomly, work things, um, just random plans popping up all over the place, right? And all of a sudden, the perfect Monday to Friday routine that people had in their head is not so perfect anymore. And that is exactly why this training matters so much, right? Because it is very easy to make good food decisions when you're at home and your fridge is stocked, but real life is not always like that. You know, sometimes you're in a restaurant and you don't know the calories. Sometimes you're at a barbecue and you don't know what's being served. Sometimes you might be traveling and having to eat in the airport or on a plane, or you're staying in a hotel. You know, maybe you're going to a wedding or just out with friends. Maybe you've a family thing planned or whatever, right? There's so many different things, right? But everything, like, there's going to be situations where tracking everything perfectly is not realistic, okay? And this is where a lot of people tend to fall apart in these situations. Not because they don't care about the results anymore, and not because that they're just lazy with it, but because I suppose they don't have the principles to kind of fall back on when the situations do change. So they either go one of two ways. They become way too rigid, and then they feel like they can't enjoy anything anymore unless it fits perfectly into the tracker on the app, or if you're using MyFitnessPal. Or they go completely the opposite way and they think, sure, I can't track this in any way, so I may as well just write off the whole day. And neither of those things are ideal, because the goal is not to be perfect, guys. The goal is just to become skilled enough with your nutrition that you can make smart decisions in any situation. This is what automatic nutrition is about, okay? It's not about guessing, or it's not about winging it. It's not just saying, oh, I listen to my body, when you have absolutely no awareness of portions, of calories, of protein, of hunger, or the choices that actually move you forwards towards your goals. So what automatic nutrition really is when you've built enough awareness and enough of an understanding that you can walk into any situation and still make a decent decision without needing everything to be on the money. You know what to prioritize, you know what to pull back on, you know what is worth it maybe and what is not so worth it. You know how to look at a menu, a buffet, a barbecue plate, a wedding 3-course meal, let's say, and think, right, what are the smartest options here that, still lets me enjoy myself but doesn't send me overboard. And this is the skill that we're going to try and build here, because long term, I do not want you to be able to just make progress when life is perfectly controlled, because it's not always going to be. Real freedom, guys, with nutrition is knowing how to make better decisions when life is busy, when you've a lot of social things on, when there's unpredictable events that pop up, and when you're not fully in control, okay? And that is why, again, this ties nicely in with the summer, because, and really it is not just a summer thing, like it can apply all year round, Christmas is another example. Whenever you go on holidays, birthdays, work events, weekends away, stressful weeks, family dinners, everything, right? There will always be situations where you're not preparing for every meal, or where you're not preparing every meal for yourself. And if your only tool is to track every gram of food perfectly, you're going to struggle when that tool is not available. We just need to be making sure that we are consciously making better decisions when we're in certain situations. Okay, that's what it's about. That's what tonight is about. I'm going to teach you these principles behind automatic nutrition that I use. Right, I'll show you how tracking builds awareness. Okay, how awareness turns into better decisions, and how awareness turns into better decisions, and how better decisions eventually will become automatic. Okay, because that is the real goal, guys. It's not needing to obsess about the numbers, not trying to be perfect all the time, not needing to panic every time you eat out. Just having a clear enough understanding of food, portions, hunger, protein, calories, and I suppose your own behaviors that can make smart decisions whenever you're in these situations, right? Or wherever you are. So first thing I suppose we need to clear up is what automatic nutrition actually means, because I don't want anyone here thinking that it means you just stop tracking either and just hoping for the best. That is not what we're talking about here. What automatic nutrition is when you've built enough awareness around food that you can make those better decisions without needing everything to be tracked all the time. You understand the basic principles well enough that even if you don't know the exact calories, you can still make a smart call in the moment, okay? So instead of needing to know the exact calories of every meal, or every sauce or every bite or every drink that you have a good understanding of what actually matters. You understand protein, portions, calorie dense foods, what actually fills you up, what choices are more likely, I suppose, to support the goals that you're working towards. And that is a skill that we're going to be building here, right? It's nutritional awareness and just becoming part of how you think. So instead of something that you only use when everything is weighed out and scanned and entered into the app, let's say you're at a restaurant, right? And you don't need to panic because you can't scan a barcode or you can't track the exact calories in the meal. You can't bring in the scales and weigh out what's on the plate, right? You can still look at the menu and you can think, right, where's my protein here? What option's going to fill me up? Where are the hidden calories I need to watch out for? Do I really need a starter, a main, and a dessert? Do I really need more drinks on the side or just more sides all in one sitting? Okay, or let's say you're at a barbecue. You don't need to think, well, look, I can't track this perfectly, so the day is going to be ruined. You can still prioritize some protein. You can still get some salad or veg and just being mindful of the extra breads, the sauces, the crisps, the alcohol, and enjoy yourself without turning it in the weekend into a full write-off. Again, this is what automatic nutrition is really about. It's not about being perfect all of the time. It's not about pretending calories don't matter either. It is about knowing how to make the best decision available for the situation that you find yourself in. And I think that distinction, guys, is really, really important because a lot of people only know how to be fully on or fully off. They're either tracking everything perfectly and feeling in control, or they're not tracking at all and they feel like they've completely lost the plot. Long term, we need to find a middle ground, right? We want you to have enough structure to make progress, but enough flexibility that you can still live your life without falling apart every time food isn't weighed out in front of you. It is like that is why tracking is useful. Like we'll talk about that properly in a minute. Tracking teaches you what food contains, what portions look like, where your calories come from, how much protein you're getting, where you normally underestimate things. But tracking is supposed to build awareness, not create dependency. So I don't want you getting to the point where the second you can't track something, you feel like you've no idea what to do. Again, this is what automatic nutrition is. It gives you that ability to walk into any real life situation with confidence and think, I might not be able to track this perfectly, but I can still make a good decision here. And that is probably the whole training summed up in one line. We've covered what it means now, right? But we need to look at why people struggle so much when they don't have structure, because this is usually where the wheels come off and people fall off track. Most people don't fall off track because they wake up one morning and they decide, you know what? I just don't care about my goals anymore. A lot of the time they fall off track because they end up in situations where they just don't know what to do. And instead of making the next best decision, they just drift into whatever is easiest. The first big problem is mindless eating. It's picking up food while you're cooking. It's having a few biscuits with the coffee. It's finishing the kids' leftovers. It's grabbing crisps because they're there instead of, you're just eating out of boredom, right? Or saying yes to things that you didn't even really want just because someone offered it to you and you felt it'd be rude not to, okay? Like none of these things feel like they're massive issues in the moment, but when they happen again and again and just often enough, they can be the difference between actually making progress and wondering why nothing is changing. The second big issue that I see most people make is that they're just not great at knowing what to actually eat. Like what someone thinks they ate and what they actually ate can be two very different things, especially when they're eating out and drinking and snacking or not paying attention to the portions. Okay, and again, this is where people get frustrated. They'll say things like, ah, sure, look, I'm not even eating that much. But when you actually break it down, the calories are sneaking in through the sauces, the oils, the drinks, the snacks, the extra portions they're not accounting for, the weekends that they just say, it doesn't count, which is complete bullshit, right? Or the little bits they forgot even happened, especially if you're a bad person for picking at things. That doesn't mean, I suppose, they're lying to themselves on purpose. It just means that they haven't built enough awareness yet, and without awareness, you're always going to be guessing. The third problem is unexpected situations. Now, you might have the best plan in the world. From Monday to Friday, everything is just laid out. But then someone invites you out for dinner, or there's a work event, or you're traveling, or there's a barbecue, or whatever it is, right? You go away for the weekend, your routine completely changes. And if the only thing keeping you on track is perfectly controlled routines, then the second that routine changes, guess what? You're in trouble. And this is why we need principles, because principles will travel with you. Okay, a meal plan doesn't always travel with you, unfortunately. Your usual breakfast might not be available. Your chicken and rice dish that you put together might not be there. My Fitness Pal might not have the exact restaurant meal, but the principles are still there if you understand them. Okay. The last big issue is the all or nothing thinking, which is probably one of the biggest ones I see. Okay, people either want to be perfect or they feel like they've failed. So they go all out for one meal, they've made one poor decision, and instead of just getting back on track for the next meal, they think, sure, look, I've ruined it now. The whole weekend turns into a free for all then after that. That is the part we need to get better at, guys. Okay, because one meal out does not ruin your progress. One barbecue doesn't mess it up. A wedding. What causes the problem is where one situation turns into 2 days and 3 days and a full week of acting like nothing matters anymore, or what's the point? Automatic nutrition is important because of that as well, right? Because it gives you something to fall back on when life is not perfectly controlled, or it stops you relying on purely motivation, perfect tracking, or having every meal prepared in advance. Because when you understand these principles, guys, you can walk into any situation and still ask yourself, what is the smartest decision I can make here? And you'll do it automatically the more you learn about these principles and building awareness. And that's exactly what you're doing right now. For any of you here tonight or listening back to the replay, it might not be perfect, the decision that you make, but it can still be better. And this is the skill most people are missing. Honestly, this is probably the thing that helps me the most to stay lean all year round, because I'm always on the go. I travel a lot. I'm on the road sometimes. I'm doing different things. I'm not always having meals. Very rarely ever would have meals in Tupperware. See people bringing meals around with them in Tupperware. That's not for me. So I have to make smarter decisions on the go, on the fly, and there is always a smarter decision we can make. It is really a skill that people are missing. You don't need to be extreme with this. Don't need to avoid every social event. It's just better awareness, better decision making when real life gets in the way. Okay? So the takeaway from this slide, guys, I want you to think about is most people struggle without structure because they eat mindlessly. They underestimate what they consume and they get caught off guard by real life situations. And then they fall into that all or nothing thinking. Okay? Automatic nutrition will help solve that because it gives you principles to follow when perfect conditions are not available. Fourth slide, guys, right? And this one's really important as well, because I don't want anyone thinking this training is me saying that tracking calories is bad, because it's definitely not, or that we should just move away from structure completely. That's not what I'm saying at all here. Tracking is one of the best tools that we have to build awareness, especially at the start of your journey, because most people, they do not naturally know what is in food. Okay, they don't know what 30 grams of protein looks like. They don't know how many calories are in oils, and how would they? Like, we've never been taught about this stuff in school, really, or how many calories are in sauces, or the snacks that we're having, or the alcohol, restaurant meals, or even the portions that they eat every day, and this is why tracking is useful, because everything counts, guys. Everything you consume likely has calories in it, unless you're having water or zero sugar, some like 0 calorie drinks or whatever. Everything else likely has a calorie or more in it, right? Now, that's why, again, tracking is useful. It gives you feedback. And the more feedback we get, the better decisions we can make, right? It shows you where your calories are coming from, where your protein is, where portions are too big, where the small extras are creeping in, and where your perception does not match reality. Okay, because a lot of people think that they are eating a certain way, let's say, but when they actually track it properly, they realize, right, I wasn't actually eating as much protein as I thought, or I didn't realize those snacks were adding up to that much, or I didn't realize my weekend was basically wiping out my whole week. Because that happens a lot. Your weekend is basically a third of your week. Friday, Saturday, Sunday is 1/3 of a week. So it's very easy to undo a lot of work over those few days. It's not a bad thing, right? This is awareness, and awareness is what allows us to change, guys. So the problem is not the tracking itself. The problem is when people track for months and months but never actually learn from it. They just are logging away, scanning barcodes, and adding in numbers, closing the app, but they don't ask themselves, what is this teaching me? That is the part I want everyone to get better at, right? If you're tracking your food, I want you paying attention to it. I want you noticing the foods that keep you full, the meals that leave you feeling like you're hungry an hour later, the snacks that are not worth the calories, the portions that actually suit your goal. Because the goal is just to not become good at tracking or logging. The goal is to become good at understanding food. Tracking is what will build your mental nutritional database. So over time, you start knowing roughly what is in the foods that you eat roughly, what a good portion looks like for you, what meals are higher in protein than others, what foods are more calorie dense, what choices usually move you closer to your goal or further away from your goal. Because once you have built that awareness, guys, you can begin to use it in situations where tracking is not realistic, right? You can go into any restaurant, go to any barbecue, sit down at any hotel breakfast or a wedding or whatever, and still have a decent idea of what is probably the smarter choice. Like it's easy for me now. It's not even like something I need to think about. I just know wherever I'm going. And like there is times where I'll just like I've calories saved up, I've banked, it's a birthday or whatever, and I just go all out. Don't get me wrong, but whenever I'm working towards something, the smarter choices are being made for the majority of the year. And again, I must emphasize this that you might not know the exact calories in these situations, right? But you're not blind anymore, right? You can look at a meal and think, right, that creamy pasta with garlic bread, those three cocktails is probably a very different choice to those steak, potatoes, and veg, or that lower calorie drink. And again, that does not mean you can never have pasta. It just means you understand the trade-off that's there. That is what we are trying to build, okay? Because the tracking builds awareness, but the automatic nutrition builds the skill. Tracking is what teaches you the numbers, but the automatic nutrition teaches you how to use the knowledge in real life. So if you're still in the phase where we have you tracking, do not see that as a punishment. See it as your education, your learning. You're gathering information about how your body responds, what's in the food that you're eating. You're gathering information on even your hunger and your habits and your usual patterns, okay? And if you are further along and you're starting to rely maybe less on tracking in certain situations, that does not mean you just stop caring completely. It means you are starting to practice using awareness that you've built. And that's a key distinction, guys. We do not want dependence solely on tracking, but we also do not want careless guessing. We want awareness first, then confidence, and that's exactly what automatic nutrition is supposed to give you, okay? So there's 3 phases, right, when it comes to automatic nutrition. And I want to kind of bring back one of the key parts from the original training that we did, right? Because this explains it in a much better and practical way. There are basically, as I said, the 3 phases you can see here on the screen, right? And if you want to get to the point where your nutrition really does feel automatic, you have to have the attention phase, you have to have the integration phase, and you need then to get to that automatic phase. The mistake a lot of people make is that they want to skip straight to automatic without doing the learning first. Okay, they want to be able to eat intuitively but not track. Have meals out, go on holidays, manage weekends, and still get results. But they haven't built the awareness or the skills yet to do that. That is like wanting to go and drive on the motorway before you've ever learned to actually drive a car. Throw them in at the deep end, right, and figure it out. So the first phase is attention. And this is where you start paying proper attention to what's actually going into your meals, what you're eating, right? How much you're eating, what your portions look like, how much protein you're getting, where your calories are coming from, what patterns keep showing up. And this is usually where tracking is very, very useful, because tracking forces you to stop guessing, and it shows you the difference between what you think you're doing and what you're actually doing. Again, it's not about me judging you in these situations, it's about the information that I want you to learn and what I'm giving you to follow. If you follow it, it will work. It's science at the end of the day. If you're telling me you're following it but it's not working, I'm like, the science doesn't break, so something else must be broken. The science is the science at the end of the day. So if you're in the attention phase, your job is to learn. You are learning what foods fill you up, what foods don't, what meals to keep you on track, what snacks are not worth it, what happens at the weekends, what happens when you're stressed, and what choices that keep pushing you backwards. This phase matters because if you don't know what's currently happening, let's say, you cannot change it properly. Then the second phase is integration, right? This is where you start taking what you've learned and actually applying it in real life. This is where you start practicing these principles when you're eating out and traveling and going to the barbecue and having the event. You're not in your usual routine. Because it's one thing to know what to eat when you're at home with a normal breakfast or a lunch or a dinner. Everything might be weighed out, right? It's a completely different skill to be at the restaurant or at the family event and still make a smart decision without everything being perfectly controlled. That is where the integration happens, okay? It is where you begin to ask better questions in the moment. Where is my protein? What options are the most filling here? What is the most calorie dense part of the meal? Do I actually need all the extras? How do I enjoy this without turning it into a full day or a full weekend write-off of poor decisions? And at the start, that will not feel very automatic to you, but you will have to think about it. You might have to pause before ordering. You might need to take a little bit longer. You might need to have a look at the menu properly. You might have to remind yourself that you don't need a starter, a main, and dessert, a creamy side, 5 drinks, and then a takeaway that night on the way home. Now, that is not a bad thing. That is the skill being built. Then over time, if you keep practicing and you move into that automatic phase, this is where the better decisions can start to become more natural. You're not sitting there and overthinking every single meal, but you're also not mindlessly eating like you used to. Okay, you start to know what makes sense. You know that if you're having a bigger meal later, you might keep breakfast and lunch a bit lighter and just higher in protein. You know if you're at a barbecue, you don't need to have 3 burgers, an extra plate of chips, creamy salads and desserts, and then picking at crisps and having a load of drink just because it's there. You know that you have one higher calorie meal, the next decision still matters. That's the automatic phase, right? And it's not never making a poor choice either. It's not becoming some robot who only eats chicken and rice for the rest of your life. It is simply getting to the point where you can make better decisions without needing to be dragged through a full decision-making process every time. But the key thing here, guys, is to understand, right? Or that I want you to understand is that you cannot fake this phase. You can't just decide, do you know what? I don't feel like tracking anymore, so I'm automatic now. Just jump straight into that phase. That's not automatic nutrition. That's just guessing. And randomly eating and randomly training also will give you very random results if you're always just guessing of what you should be doing. Automatic nutrition is really earned through awareness, practice, and repetition. Just like in the gym, okay? Just like when you're lifting weights, okay? Repetition and practice and getting better over time. So if you're still at that attention phase, that's okay. Your job is to learn and to build that awareness, okay? If you're in the integration phase, your job is to practice these principles in real life and not panic when things are not perfect. And if you're moving into the automatic phase, your job is to keep the habits in place without letting yourself slowly drift back into those old behaviors. That is the point of these three phases. Attention teaches you what's going on. Integration teaches you how to apply it. Automatic is what happens when those better decisions become part of how you live. And this is what we want for you long term, guys, okay? Not just a diet that you can follow when everything is nice and easy and dandy and rosy and all that crap, but a way of thinking around food that actually helps you make progress in all these real life scenarios. So the framework for automatic nutrition, right? I want you using this framework when you're in a situation where tracking is not perfect or your usual routine is not available. And this is the part that makes automatic nutrition very practical, right? Because it gives you a set of, and you can screenshot this if you want as well, guys, but it gives you a set of questions to run through instead of just standing there and thinking, I don't know what to do here. The first one is, where's my protein? This is usually the best place to start because protein, as we know it, helps with fullness, muscle retention, recovery, body composition, keeping the meal more goal focused. So whether you're at a restaurant, eating out, a work lunch, you're on the road somewhere, I want you looking at protein first, always. That might mean chicken, steak, fish, eggs, Greek yogurt, lean mince, prawns, turkey, a protein yogurt, a protein shake, whatever it is in that situation. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but there should be some form of protein if you're trying to make a better decision. The second one is, where is your fiber and volume coming from? This could be vegetables, salad, fruit, potatoes, beans, lentils, higher fiber carbohydrates depending on the meal. The reason that matters is because fiber and volume will actually help you feel full rather than just eating loads of calorie dense food that disappears in 5 minutes and just leaves you feeling hungrier an hour or two later. Again, this is why a plate of protein, potatoes and veg is usually going to serve you very differently to a plate of garlic bread, chips, creamy pasta, and a few bites of protein thrown in somewhere that you probably can't even find. The third question is, what is the calorie dense part of the meal? And this is where you need to start looking at the stuff that can quietly drive the calories up, right? Without filling you up that much. Things like oil, creamy sauces, cheese, nuts, dressing, chips, pastries, alcohol, cocktails in particular, and extra bits that can go around the meals, right? And again, I am not saying you can never have those things. I just want you to be more aware of them, because a lot of people will look at a meal and think that wasn't even that bad, but they're forgetting the oil it was cooked in, the sauce that was on top of it, the chips on the side, the bread before it, the dessert after, and the drinks that came with it. That's why, again, awareness matters, right? So the fourth question is, what can I reduce or swap without ruining the experience? And this is a massive one, because automatic nutrition as well, guys, is not about taking the enjoyment away from your life, okay? It is about finding the smarter version of the choice that you were already going to make. So maybe you still have the burger, but you might skip the chips, or you share the chips. Maybe, or you don't have the bun, or you have half the bun, right? Maybe you still have the meal out, but you don't need the starter and the dessert as well. Maybe you still have the drink, but you choose a lower calorie option instead of the cocktails all night. Maybe you still enjoy the barbecue, but you build your plate around meat and salad and maybe one or two things you actually want instead of just eating everything that's in sight just because it's there. So the last question then is, what choice moves me forward without ruining the experience? Because sometimes the best choice is not the lowest calorie choice. Sometimes the best choice is the one that allows you to enjoy the occasion, stay in control, and not turn one meal into a full day or a weekend of poor decisions. That's the mindset shift, guys, that I want you to have. If you go to the wedding, the goal is probably not to sit there and eating plain chicken and drinking water all night. But it's also not to use the wedding as an excuse to eat and drink like calories no longer exist for the next 48 hours. We need to find that middle ground, right? Enjoy the day, make the smarter choices, and don't let it spill into a full write-off. Okay, so that's the framework, guys. Screenshot these questions if you want, and that is what automatic nutrition is going to be built on. This is where it really matters as well. It's not just when you're sitting at home and you're eating your usual meals, right? That's when everything's easy to control. So we'll start with the restaurants, right? Because this is probably one of the most common ones. When you go to the restaurant, the goal is not to just sit there with your phone and trying to track every single ingredient possible, because most of the time you're not going to know. You do not know how much oil the chef has used, how much butter is in the sauce, how much portions or how big the portions you're going to get, or what exactly went into the meal. That does not mean you're helpless either, guys, okay? You can still look at the menu and ask some questions that we covered here. You can still say, like, where is my protein? Is there a leaner option that still sounds nice? Is there a side that I can swap in? Do I need the starter and the main, the creamy sauce, and so on, right? That's the skills that we're building. And then we look at a barbecue. Again, they can be actually fairly easy to manage, believe it or not, because, or it can become a calorie bomb if you just say, fuck it. We don't want you saying fuck it. It's all about how you approach it. You could build a plate around the chicken, the steak, the beef patties that you'll be having without going mad with all the carbs and the sides and the buns and the cheese side salads and the potatoes and so on, right? You can choose one or two extras you really want, have a proper meal, but don't be having a meal that would serve 3 people or 2 people. Or again, another thing is that these things, because the food stays sticking around, is you just graze at it because it's there. You keep reaching for more crisps and dips and extras, right? Sausages and burgers and all that crack, right? It's the same event, but there can be two completely different outcomes. Just being able to walk into that situation and go, right, I can still enjoy myself, but I'm going to be a bit more intentional here with how I build my plate. Weddings is often the big one. I have a wedding next week myself, right, that I'm going to. Weddings are usually a full day event. It's not just a meal. It's the drinks before the meal, it's the dessert, it's the late night food, there's more drink after that, and then sometimes it's next day, right? There's day twos now. And it turns into breakfast rolls first to start the day and then eating crap throughout the day, and you know how it goes, right? Again, I'm not saying don't enjoy the wedding, but of course you should enjoy it, but there's a difference between enjoying the day and using the day as permission to just completely switch your brain off for 48 hours. A smarter approach might be keeping the breakfast low on carbs, high in protein, not turning the morning into a full fry up if you don't need it, choosing your drinks a little bit more wisely, 0 calorie mixers, lower calorie beers, and so on. Enjoying the meal at the dinner and maybe picking between the starter and the main, or going with the main and the dessert. This is the kind of thing that makes a huge difference. Holidays is another example. Most people go on holidays and suddenly every meal feels like it has to be a special occasion, that you need to eat every single meal out. Breakfast buffets, snacks, drinks, lunch out, ice cream out, dinner out, cocktails, desserts, and everything else. And then they wonder why they came home and they're up a stone. And look, you are allowed to enjoy the holiday as well. I say this all the time, but enjoying yourself does not mean you need to eat like a lunatic for the 7 days you're away. That is the point here, guys. In all these situations, you're not looking for perfection, you're looking at the smartest decision that's available. Sometimes that means choosing the higher protein option. Sometimes it might mean skipping breakfast, or it might mean skipping a starter or a dessert. Sometimes it's choosing the lower calorie drinks, or just maybe saying no to alcohol. You can do that too. Don't be afraid to do it. You'll thank yourself the next day often. The truth of it is, there will be always something coming up. That's why these trainings are important. If it is not the summer, which has a lot of events, it's going to be Christmas, it's going to be birthdays. You know, if it's not a holiday, it's a work event. If it's not a meal out, it might be a stressful week you need to manage, where convenience foods become a bit easier. So waiting for life to calm down before you learn to manage food is not a very good strategy. Okay, I would not recommend that. Life is always going to happen, guys. So the goal is to get better at making decisions while life is happening to us. A lot of the time people eat because they're bored, right? They're tired, they're stressed, they're emotional, they're procrastinating, they're sitting in front of the TV and they're scrolling on the phone, and because food is just there in front of them, they have to eat it. And if you cannot tell the difference between actual hunger and those other triggers, you will always struggle when structure is removed. So, am I actually hungry is an important question to ask. And I don't mean this to be harsh or anything like that, but I mean just pause for a few seconds and actually check in with yourself before you eat. Especially if it's a snack, or you're picking at something, or your cravings start to kick in, or it's just one of those random moments where you find yourself standing in the kitchen and looking for something, right? Because physical hunger usually builds gradually. You feel it in the body. You'll probably eat a proper meal. You're not only looking for one specific thing like chocolate crisps and biscuits or something sweet. A craving usually feels different. That's the big difference, right? And I think this is where a lot of people will slip up, because they try and solve every feeling with food. They're stressed, so they eat. They're bored, so they eat. They're tired, so they eat. They're annoyed, so they eat, right? They feel like they're deserving of something, so they eat. And listen, I'm not saying that to make anyone feel bad, but it's just the truth of the matter, right? We've all done it. I just want you to be aware, because awareness is what gives you a chance to respond differently. So if you are about to eat and you're not sure if it's actual hunger, ask yourself a few better questions. When did I last eat? Did I have protein in that meal? Have I drank enough water today? Am I tired? Am I stressed? Am I bored? Would I eat a proper meal now, or do I only want something sweet or snacky? Those questions will tell you a lot. We want you making these like smarter choices consciously instead of just sleepwalking into it, okay? And the other big thing here is your environment, right? A lot of people think that they have terrible willpower, but really their environment is set up terribly. If the press is full of crisps, biscuits, sweets, chocolate and snack foods, and you're tired at 9 p.m. after a stressful day, it's not exactly shocking that you start picking at these things. It's not a character flaw or anything like that. It's just a poor environment and making the wrong decisions. So your job is to just start noticing these patterns, because once you know where you usually slip, you can make better decisions. You can put better systems in place, and you can keep better snacks in the house, right? You can eat a proper protein-based meal before you go somewhere. You can avoid going food shopping when you're starving, right? You can plan what you're having at night instead of just leaving it to tired decision making. You can decide ahead of time what you're going to do at a social event instead of just winging it when you're hungry and you're tempted. So if you can build that awareness, guys, you will make better decisions. Absolutely. The 10 automatic nutrition principles. Again, you can screenshot this if you want, and I want you to start coming back to this again and again, okay? The first one is protein at every meal, okay? Or at least meals where possible. If you can anchor your meals around protein, you're going to feel fuller, you're going to support muscle, you're going to recover better from your training. The second one is fruit, veg, or some form of fiber daily. And now I don't need you eating like a rabbit, right? And just building your diet but if your diet is built around things like bread and crisps and chocolate and takeaways and protein bars, you're going to feel very different compared to something that's getting proper whole foods in with fiber and micronutrients and volume into their day. The third one is to build meals that actually fill you up. This is where again a lot of people go wrong, because they eat things that are technically fine, but the meal has no volume, there's no fiber, there's very little protein. A filling meal usually has some protein, a form of carbs depending, or veg, and enough volume that you don't finish it immediately and you start looking for something else. The fourth one is to be intentional with your snacks. Snacks are not bad either, guys, but random snacking is where people get caught, because a few biscuits, a bag of crisps, a handful of nuts, a coffee in a shop, a coffee and a pastry, these add up very quickly. If you're going to snack, make it make sense. The fifth one is to watch the sneaky extras, the sauces, the oils, the butters, the cheeses, the nuts, the spreads. Okay, the little extras that turn a fairly normal meal into a very high calorie meal. Okay, again, be mindful of it. You know, the body does not care that it was just a bit of sauce or just a drizzle of oil, because if it happens too often, those little extras become often the things that are holding you back. The sixth one is to choose lower calorie drinks regularly, especially if fat loss is your goal. That doesn't mean you can never have a pint or a cocktail or a full sugar drink, you know, but if your default drinks are always high calorie, you're making the process harder than it needs to be. The seventh one is to keep some consistency with meal timing and structure. You don't need to eat at the exact same time every day, but if your meals are very chaotic, or you skip food or undereat protein, then you arrive into the evening absolutely starving, you're probably going to make a worse decision. So for most people, having some kind of rhythm helps massively. The eighth one is to slow down when you eat. It sounds basic, guys, but a lot of people, they eat like someone's about to steal the food off the plate, and then they're uncomfortably full and bloated, and their brain has never caught up with what's happened. If you can slow down, chew your food properly, and actually pay attention to the meal, you'll notice fullness much earlier. The ninth one is to never let one poor choice become two if you can help it, right? This is the one I feel like probably the most useful for real life, because you know, you're going to have meals that are higher in calories, you're going to have days that are a bit messier than others, and you're going to have to make a choice or a decision that might not be perfect. It's not a problem if that happens, right? The problem is when one meal turns into I've ruined it now, and then the next meal, and then the next meal, and then it's the next day, and then the weekend, and everything that goes with it. The 10th one is plan ahead when you can. Okay, automatic nutrition does not mean no planning. It just means you're relying on, you're not relying, I should say, on perfect tracking all the time. And planning is still one of the easiest ways to make better decisions. So those are the principles, guys. Screenshot this if you haven't already. Make a mental note of them. Come back to them. You don't need to nail all 10 perfectly every day, but the more you live by these, the easier it becomes to make better decisions without having to track every single thing perfectly. The next thing is like, how do you actually practice this without just using it as an excuse to drift off the track? So the way I want you to practice this is by testing your own knowledge instead of blindly just trusting it. A really simple way to look at this is like, look at a meal, especially when you're eating out or eating something you didn't prepare, and guess what you think is in it before you can check. Guess the calories, guess the protein, and put it into the app afterwards and see, did you get close? Okay, that might sound simple, but honestly, it's a brilliant skill to build because it starts training your eye. Okay, you start learning what 500 calories looks like. You start learning what 900 looks like, what a proper protein portion looks like, where the sneaky calories are coming in from. You also start noticing where you're underestimating things, which is most important. That's probably one of the biggest reasons people struggle when they stop tracking. So I promise you guys, like, most people are not as accurate as they think they are at the start. Okay, they look at a restaurant meal and think, it's probably 500, 600. But when you factor in the oils, the sauces, the side of chips, the dressing, the cheese, or whatever else, the portion might be closer to 1,000 or 1,200. And again, that wouldn't be a reason to panic. It's just education. That is you building the mental database that we spoke about earlier. Another useful thing is to overestimate a little bit when you're eating out, okay? Just to touch on that. Chefs are not cooking for your fat loss phase. They don't give a shit if you're in a fat loss phase or not, right? They're cooking for taste, which usually means more oil, more butters, more sauces, bigger portions, right? More calories than you probably would use at home. So if you're eating out, trying to estimate, don't give yourself the most generous version possible. Be realistic with it. The next thing to pay attention to, I suppose, is your progress markers, right? Pay attention to your progress markers while you practice it. If you're stepping away from tracking a little bit or tracking less around social events, you still need some feedback. That might be your scale weight, did it shoot up? Might be your photos, are you looking a bit more bloated or softer? Your measurements, your clothes, are they a bit tighter? Is your energy after taking a hit? Your hunger, is it a bit all over the place? Your gym performance, is it working better or worse? Your digestion. Take note of how you feel. Make those mental notes. Jot them down on your phone if you need to. It just means that we can tighten things up again and maybe track more closely for a while we're building that awareness, or while we rebuild that awareness. With this slide, guys, like, just think about it like this. Don't just guess and hope for the best. You can guess, then check, then learn, and then you'll adjust. And next time, you'll do it better. That is how you build a skill. You guess what you think is in the meal. You check it after. You learn, were you right or were you wrong? Did you get close or were you too far away? Then you use that information to make a better decision next time. And then you iterate and get better and better and better. That's how you learn. You look at the menu and you have a much better idea of what's going in to support your goals. You go to the barbecue, the wedding, and you don't feel completely lost. You can eat out without needing to panic, but also without pretending calories don't exist. Like, the main thing I want you to take away from tonight is that automatic nutrition is simply a skill. It's like any skill. You get better at it by practicing it properly. It's not about being perfect. It's not about pretending calories don't matter just because you're not tracking everything. It is about building enough awareness that you can walk into any situation and make a better choice, okay? That's the big win here, to learn from this. It's all well and good listening to me here, but I need you to put this stuff into action now. This is what I want you getting better at. Pause, think, make a better decision that's available, and then move on. Your action task from this training is simple. At some point in the next week or next couple of weeks, I want you to pick one real life food situation and practice the skill. It could be a meal out, maybe you get a takeaway, maybe it's a barbecue, it could be a coffee shop or a lunch on the go while you're on the road, or maybe you're traveling, or maybe you've a holiday, or even just a meal you had at home that you wouldn't normally have, let's say, and you wouldn't think about it too much. Before you track it, check it, and I want you to guess what you think it is. Rough calories and rough protein, and if you can, roughly where the calories are coming from. Okay, then after, you can check it properly on the app or MyFitnessPal. You can compare it to something similar, see how close you were. The point of it is not to make you obsessive, guys. It's just, the point of it is to train your eye. Alright, train your eye on what you can see, what's on a plate. The more you do this, the better the awareness becomes, the better your decisions will make in the future, okay? The more confident you'll feel when you're in situations where tracking is not going to be perfect. That's it, guys. The more you practice this stuff, the less food feels confusing. The less you panic when you can't track. The easier it becomes to make real life situations work in your favor rather than against you. So the final message is, automatic nutrition is not about having no structure. It's about building so much awareness that better decisions become part of who you are, right? How you naturally live. That's where the freedom is and flexibility is with nutrition, guys.